take refuge in Buddha, take refuge in Dharma, I take refuge in Sangha, the community that practices together. It's so good to be here. It feels very autumny, even in the room. Well, what I want to talk about today is inspired by Hurricane Helene. As many of you have probably read the news or seen pictures of what was going on in the southeast and in western North Carolina. And my girlfriend and I, from I think 2021 to 2023, we lived in Asheville. And Asheville has been rocked and devastated by Hurricane Helene. And so there's been a process, first of all, a number of days of not knowing if people we were close with were even alive, because cell phones were down and power was spotty, if not still spotty in places. And then later getting news of friends' cars being swept away. And the thing that most hit home is there was a couple that were friends of my girlfriend and I that lived in a place called Black Mountain, which is famous for Black Mountain College, historical town. Anyways, they were in their house during the storm and it began to collapse on them and almost died. And in fact, my friend Deborah, she only survived because a current of mud sort of spat her out. She got swept by, I don't know, I guess a current is what you would call it, and saw some light outside of the house. Otherwise, she would have collapsed inside of the home. And these were pretty close friends of mine. And so I was looking at photos of the house that I used to spend time in. Had lovely dinner parties. My partner house sat in that place. And so that's very present with me, and I can feel some of the sort of, I guess I would call it vicarious grief, because I'm safe and dry and at a distance, but many of my dear ones have been and are going through the ringer. It's quite something to look at devastation at a distance, right? And be like, oh, we used to go to that cafe, and now it's just basically a shell, for example. So, but as being a Dharma practitioner, we are invited to read the Book of Life for its constant teachings. And in some sense, we wouldn't need the Buddha's teaching if we really, with our eyes wide open, really read the Book of Life. So I think I have basically 3 points that I want to talk about today. The first is, or I don't know if they're in order, maybe they are. Expect change, whether violent and abrupt or gradual, expect it. Be grateful for what is stable, those are interdependent, and be stability yourself. So one of the principles of Buddhist teaching is that things do not inherently exist. And it's hard to actually have a feeling for what this means. It so easily becomes kind of up in the attic of concept. One way you could think of it is everything is contingent. Everything, situation, person, feeling, whatever you can experience, that is existing contingently. And the best image I have of that is, let's say you had 8 or 10 sticks, okay, and they're about the same length, and you put them on the ground to form a cone. Maybe if you have made a campfire, you've done something like that with the tinder, you make that little cone. And that cone depends on every stick. If you remove one stick, that cone will collapse. You can build another cone. It's a different cone then. But nonetheless, that object at rest depends on all of those factors being in place. And so much of what we take to be solid and here is only contingently here. It's delicately here. It depends on one thing leaning on another, that if that were to shift a little bit or be removed, the whole thing falls down. Or the whole thing changes. So there were many instances in Western North Carolina where it rained so much that the soil and basically the earth became so wet that it no longer gave traction to trees. And then trees fell on houses and crashed through walls. And then the water could get in. If that hadn't happened, if the soil hadn't bottomed out or flooded out, the tree hadn't fallen, some of those structures would still stand. Right? It was just mud, dirt not being wet was the contingent factor of a house not being destroyed. Just one thing, in a sense. But each of those things is actually connected to many things. All the contingencies are contingent. Right? It's important to try to make this personal. Think of a situation that you are nourished by and how one or two factors shift the situation. Just think of anything that you rely on a daily basis. Maybe there's a workplace where the reason you can hang in there is because there's one supervisor who really looks you in the eye and treats you with love. And that's how you're able to keep showing up. Well, that person leaves. That whole situation changes. Or a finger is broken. Some of you, if you break a finger, it's no big deal. Some people, if they break a finger, their whole career is put on pause. A craftsperson, a musician, a plumber, I don't know. Power goes out. When I was living in the southeast, they have a lot of storms, and the power companies do not have the infrastructure to keep power from going out longer than most people on the West Coast can imagine. So when I was in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, which is a wealthy college town, they are used to the power sometimes going out for 2 weeks at a time in the summer. Well, if you work remotely, the power being out suddenly threatens your food. It threatens your shelter. It threatens all of your relationships if you work remote. A belief evaporates. Sometimes people on the spiritual path, they had a belief that shored them up, and that belief is seen through or lets go of them, and then suddenly left with a new existential reality. In fact, in Zen practice, we lean into that. We ask for our beliefs that aren't rooted in deeper truth to evaporate. So you can look at it from this side of everything is so delicate and fragile, right, and could fall apart. You could also look at it and say, thank you, running water. Thank you, electricity. Thank you, wife that puts up with my moods. Thank you, bus that somehow just shows up. I want to invite you in just a moment or two of reflection. Think of appearances that nourish you or bring you joy or safety. that are here, but don't have to be, could easily be gone. All of the many presences that bring us some sense of sanity, there's not a single one of them that is a given. And so, in a sense, the universe is perfectly faithful to itself by bottoming out at times. It's never been otherwise. The whole thing is completely contingent. The whole thing is shot through with openness. That's why things can be created. That's why things can be changed. But because everything is shot through with openness, it's all contingent. It can change just like that. The universe is perfectly loyal to the universe when there's a hurricane, even if it is partially caused by humans being humans, accelerating things through global warming. The universe is perfectly faithful to the universe, unerringly, when there's a hurricane. And water falls, and earth gets wet, and trees come down, and walls are impacted, and water rushes in. It's all just... it's faithful to itself. That's true, and we human beings are often, most of the time, in friction with the way the universe is. Things bottom out or change, and we realize, I co-created disappointment. I thought my house could last forever. I thought I could build this house and really invest my happiness in it, because I forgot it was completely contingent. Or I thought that I could completely invest in this person, but one dimension of them is they're a body, and this body is trespassed by life. We passively, by not keeping our wisdom eye open, by not reading the book of life, we co-create disappointment. We co-create resentment. We co-create panic. We might just be in a time of increasing crisis. For all the talk of things that have always been shifty and groundless, it's not true that people always have experienced the kind of accelerating technological changes, cultural changes, and global warming, where weather is now bottoming out. That too is not even reliable. I sometimes like to be poetic in Dharma talks and talk about the seasons, and I realize you can't really talk about the seasons anymore. You can't talk about what autumn is like, because maybe it's not in Houston. Last I checked, what is this, like October? It's October 6th. 3 days ago, it was 105 degrees in Texas. I don't know if that's normal. So we're in a time where it's really revealed to us the great contingency of things. There's a few things that come to mind around that. One is that we try to use the ingredients of life to come more alive, rather than simply be victimized by them. That's one of the gifts of practice. Right? You are winning the capacity to respond creatively to situations. And a shifty universe that's loyal to what it is prevents real motivation for practice. And in a way, real motivation for virtue. Now, sometimes there are crises, and human beings do not rise to the occasion. But often, and with Katrina and with Hurricane Helene, a lot of people observe that people really do rise to the occasion and show up for each other. They really show up for each other. There's some way in which the demands of the moment kind of interrupt self-grasping. Our little tribes of 3 or 4, you know how we live in our domestic little tribes, get disrupted, and we suddenly have no choice but to rely on each other and to take care of each other. And that's what's happening, at least from the perspective of my friends in Asheville. People really showing up for each other. The routines and the siloing that we normally do because it's comfortable, or we believe it's comfortable, it gets broken up. And so some of the virtues of the Dharma, like generosity, like selflessness, like thinking interconnection, become actually imperatives. There's a phrase that I really like that's going around nowadays, and it's, "We all we got." We are all we got. People are starting to see that you can't rely on institutions in the way that you might have thought you could. You can't rely on the weather in the way that you might have thought you could. People in Asheville, hurricanes are not something that touch down in Asheville. You have floods, but so one way to talk about what Zen practice is it's training to actually be a good friend. It's training in the capacity to be a good neighbor. It is developing stability of mind such that we won't only be taken by our panic. We won't only be taken by self-centeredness, but we'll have some clarity that's access to something else. So the word loyalty has been coming to mind. When we're faced with challenge, different parts of us are catalyzed, right? And in a sense, it's like many stations are clamoring for attention at once. Think about the last time you had a major life disruption. And there's the self-grasping instinct comes, right? There's, how am I going to manage? But what else is there, right? Our power to be present, in a sense, is selecting the best part of us. We continually choose to embody virtue. It's not necessarily going to happen just on its own. Virtue meaning showing up as a generous being. Governments have no fixed nature. Climates have no fixed nature. Humans have no fixed nature. But that means that openness that we're shot through with, that everything is shot through with, it gives us some ability to direct how we appear. So I think in these kinds of times, if we feel the distress that external stability is sort of, the emperor has no clothes. External stability is a gift when it's there. It's not something that we can take for granted. Then we think, what is it that I can be stable in? Many people in our culture lack a sense of inner love, and so they want to find it stably in another person. Human beings have no fixed nature. A human being can't consistently be anything, or can't perfectly consistently be anything. But with our practice, we can be more and more consistent. If we're worried about the world being, love evaporating from the world, then as practitioners, we can decide at least one thing I can do about it is practice it here. I can practice it here. Some of the words for meditative concentration in Chinese have the etymology and the characters of a stable platform. Right? You have a basis from which you don't have to freak out even in the midst of freaking out. You have the basis from which to see the different avenues that you can go down. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Yeah. Let's use the wide open book of life about what this moment in time is to see this practice is, on one level, it's optional, you're choosing to do it. But on another level, it's vital. It's vital. This is spiritual training that will matter, that matters. Because we don't know what's coming down the pipeline. Yeah. Okay. I would love to talk about this with you and see if you have any thoughts or reflections on this. Yes.
Hi. You said you had 3 points at the beginning, mm-hmm. And the second one was something about having faith in what is that which is stable.
Appreciating that which is stable.
Appreciating that which is stable. Could you talk more about that point?
Yeah. So it's interesting. People from the outside think if I train in witnessing impermanence, which is so core to dharma, then I might become sort of a pessimist. And I suppose that is possible if one fixates on impermanence as some kind of absolute truth. But watching how, for example, a time in a friendship is so delicately contingent, and then watching how that changes, how that is going to change. People change, circumstance changes, minds change. That when there is alignment with somebody, it's easy to see how precious it is. Or it makes it possible to see just how precious it is when things work. Because everything is moving, when things work, it's an absolute miracle. And that miracle is steady. We just have to look around to see it. But that is also being interrupted all the time. Our places of stable nourishment are changing, and that makes us have to look and see where is it still there. And I think that process creates gratitude. Some people have had the book of life have them lose a parent when they were very young, or a friend, or an illness comes and no longer able to do something they once loved. Sometimes people get this really directly. Right? And for some of us, it's more slow, the kind of this lesson of, oh yeah, I can't hang my hat on anything, so what is available now is such a blessing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. You mentioned the universe, having faith in the universe. Can you elaborate on that? Because what do you mean, that it just is how it is, or?
Yeah, I wasn't anthropomorphizing.
Okay.
It just is how it is. And we passively enact betrayal on ourselves by not really wanting to see that and bring our life into alignment with that truth. Therefore, there needs to be Buddhism. It's never, so for example, the 3 sights is part of the Buddha's mythology. The Buddha was living a life of ease and then saw 3 things that had them pick up the thread of practice again. They really saw. We shouldn't think of it as, the first time I ever saw a sick person, but more like really saw. Buddha really saw somebody diseased and reflected on what does that mean about life. The Buddha really saw somebody infirm from age and thought, what does that really mean about life? And the Buddha really saw someone deeply at peace who was a renunciate, who didn't have a palace, and thought, what does that really mean about life? And so we don't want to look at those things often. In some sense, the Dharma is a confrontation between what we want to be true and what is true. And the difference between what we want to be true and what is true, that's where our friction is. So the universe being faithful to itself is it's all just what's happening. It's all just the creative unfolding of the way things work, which is that they're contingent. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I came in at the very end, so I only caught a little bit of it. But I could tell right away it was a really good talk. So thank you. And less of a question and more of a encouragement for the Sangha. I want to emphasize and reiterate the point that what we're doing here is a matter of life and death in some sense. I think of it like not what can I do for myself, but who are the type of person, or what type of person are you going to be at your father's funeral? And can you show up for everybody else? So in some sense, this is the most important thing that we could do. Sometimes people think it's pointless, we're just sitting, we should be out protesting or solving the world's problems, but I really think it starts here. And the other piece of encouragement I wanted to give was, in my experience, it's cumulative. Sitting stacks up, and if you go away and you come back, it's okay, because it's going to keep piling up, and it's going to open your heart more. So keep coming back.
Mm-hmm. I think I just want to riff on one thing, and I think that we really do care, even if we perform indifference, about how we show up for those we care about. When I talk with people, the number one thing that weighs on their hearts is how they treated somebody in the past, or how they didn't step up into the fullness of their sincerity or their coming forth. Because we're socially wired creatures. So if we're in tune with our hearts around our social life, I think it really helps us make the connection between Zazen and who we are. And we have to feel that it's not insignificant. It's a visceral thing. As an idea, I'm not sure how potent it is. This is an experiment right now. Seeing how potent is it, I don't know. But we have to feel it. And that's why in the Bodhisattva precepts, 3 or 4 of them are about speech, which definitely has to do with other humans. Right? Capacity to have loving and non-reactive speech is dependent on our practice. We'll lose that when our mind is muddy or when we're captured by panic. We lose our ability to communicate with sanity. So it's all tied together.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for the talk.
Sure.
I have a question, and I would just love to hear your thoughts. How deterministic do you see this contingency of life? And if we perceive everything to be for a reason in terms of if there's this, there's that, right? And because there's that, there's this, does that mean that everything leads us here or there, and that we're predetermined to be somewhere by the virtue of things or just the nature of things? Or how much can we actually change by our actions and make that impact?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question. Buddhist practice has as its foundation the philosophy that fate, which you're describing, are things predetermined, and free will are both wrong. To think we're utterly free to choose and that we make decisions as if we're some agent apart from the world, and that, no, we are just mechanistic, we're just following instinct, we're just bodies doing what bodies do. Both of those are wrong. And to discover what the middle is a matter of practice. Right? Everything is shot through with nothingness. Everything has so much space in it. So that means that possibility can never be ended. Right? Nothing can ever be final. Right? And for example, who knows how human beings will respond to global warming? We don't know yet. And actions that are coming from us are, in some sense, designing that future that comes. Right? So, though towards the side of free will, a practitioner is trying to win more and more clarity about habitual patterns. So for example, if I have a response of I'm going to build a bunker and forget all the rest of you and just go hide, if I win in more and more awareness, I can see that there's another way to go about things. But that we're totally free from circumstance. For example, the circumstance of our instinctual body is not Buddhist teaching either. So, it's not our fault, but we're responsible. That's maybe a summation.
Yeah, something to contemplate.
Yeah, did I respond to your question at all?
And I wasn't looking for an answer
Yeah,
to your
I don't have
question
one.
because I don't think anybody.
No.
But
No.
lovely discussion, thank you.
Yeah. this person we are right here is something that we co-created from the person that we were in the past. But it's not, but cause and effect is not one directional. Everything is affecting everything. So culture is a part of that, and biology is a part of that, and it's all multi co-creating. So last thing I'll say, we're looking for where we actually have power in all this. If you are moved by what you've seen of Hurricane Helene, please consider being generous and making donations to support people out there who are just trying to stay warm and eat and all of that stuff. There's plenty of places that you could offer some of your resources to support those communities out there. Okay. Thank you.